Don't fade away when light shatters love in the dark. Deep inside, dreams of life.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Random PSA. I've been told if you put Dispensary on Nyx and cast it while in Assimilate, it restores all parkour functionality. This happens because of Dispensary being a non-rooted, two-handed full-body cast animation. Now this can be used for cancelling other stuff too, but yeah. Bullet jump, sprinting, rolls, all of it, and you still get the 30% movement penalty though, so bring in Incarnon Melee with a global movement speed buff. Anyways, today's video comes with a very big disclaimer. This build is not always practical and functions more as a showcase. It works both for KPM-oriented modes like Survival and DPS-oriented modes like Disruption Demlists, but may take some practice to get used to. For those interested in using it, you will find all the information required here. There are brand new tools and tech that were created to achieve today's build that can be used to great effect on completely different frames and loadouts, of which you will see me uploading over the next few days. Otherwise, today, a Warframe hotfix dropped that finally fixed Nyx mind control to actually last 60 seconds at base, as stated in the rework. Warframe 1999 actually dropped with it nerfed to 30 seconds by accident. This is actually very important, because the 2 Billion Absorb Build hinges on mind control and 60 seconds base duration means you only have to set back up half as often. How much actual duration? As much as you can get. Today I have about 350. Duration Archon Shards are strongly recommended as you don't need anything else. Let's go over the tools we need for today's Absorb showcase. These are split into the topics of Mind Control, Melee Afflictions, Contagious Bond, and Heat Inherit. With Nyx's rework, damage dealt by confused enemies and mind control targets can funnel into Absorb's AoE damage charge. Therefore, making a mind control target deal ridiculous amounts of damage allows you to instantly charge your Absorb to nuke in a massive AoE, which doesn't have line of sight checks. It was already possible to make a damage cap mind control dummy before Nyx's rework, but was more niche because it wasn't able to funnel into Absorb back then. Melee Afflictions is the key tool to amplify damage in this build. In loose terms, every time it procs from lifted, ragdoll, or knockdown on an enemy with your melee, it duplicates the total amount of status damage present on the enemy from dots and reapplies all of it several times with new status procs. The math gets a lot more complicated, but it isn't needed for today's explanation, because it multiplies total status damage present on each activation. Proccing Melee Affliction several times on the same enemy results in exponential damage scaling. Therefore, we pick dual dagger heavy attacks. This melee class has a unique heavy attack that hits twice, with both hits force proccing knockdown. It's the only melee class that guarantees 2 activations of melee afflictions per attack, is fast, and spammable. For example, if you proc once / normally, Afflictions turns that into 7 for 7 times scaling. If you proc it twice, it's now 7 times 7 damage. That's what every dual dagger heavy can do. And if you use the full heavy attack twice, with each hit hitting twice, that's 7 times 7 times 7 times 7 final damage. See how it gets out of hand super quickly? Alright, so next up, Contagious Bond. Why do we need this? Once upon a time, casting Blood Altar and spamming melee afflictions onto an enemy built up massive damage. Casting Mind Control would turn all of this damage in the altar into a massive damage buff on the dummy. This changed with Warframe 1999. Casting Mind Control this way no longer removes Blood Altar's iframes, and does not allow the stored damage to convert into Mind Control. But Mind Control still holds all the dot stacks on it, which you can see if I uncast Mind Control, it instantly burns to death or gets slashed to death. What if we can use that damage another way? Enter Contagious Bond. If an enemy dies to heat procs created by my sentinel, then they will spread that within 9 meters to the next enemies with no chaining limit. So if that Blood Altar contains a 2 billion damage heat proc from my sentinel, then when I uncast Mind Control, it will burn to death and instantly spread it to everything nearby. If I cast Mind Control again on a nearby enemy, it will eat that dot. And this time, that dot hit does count towards damage converted into Mind Control, because that new enemy doesn't have the iframes from Blood Altar. That's how we get the millions and billions damage percent Mind Control dummy. But this begs the question, how do I get a 2 billion heat proc on the Blood Altar? Well, this is where Heat Inherit comes in. Ownership of heat procs is different than all other status procs. All heat proc duration is refreshed whenever a new proc is added. Also, all heat procs on an enemy are owned by the source who inflicted the first proc regardless of where later procs come from. In other words, if I let my Sentinel tag this enemy first, all these heat procs I make with my Boar Incarnon after are actually owned by my Sentinel. This means I can jack up the heat dot my Sentinel spreads via Contagious Bond by using my own weapons instead. While it only spreads 100 heat procs max, it uses the newest 100 heat procs. Because melee Afflictions can reapply a few new heat procs with damage equal to all other heat procs present, it guarantees we lose no damage. Thus, let your Sentinel tag an enemy, blood alter it, throw some more heat procs on with a good heat weapon, then spam multiply everything with your dual dagger heavies. Mind control it to nullify all the raw damage to guarantee when you unmind control it, it dies to heat procs instead of the raw damage stored in blood alter. Then, you mind control a second enemy, so that Contagious Bond spreads the heat procs into it for massive damage. Enjoy your millions to billions of damage percent ally. Is this super tedious? Yes, which is why it's partially a showcase instead of a recommendation. But that's also why I run sky high duration, so I only have to do this once every 3 to 4 minutes, and why mind control being fixed to last 60 seconds at base with today's hotfix was so important. Parts of the tech shown here today will be reused for future frame builds and showcases in the near future. So let's look at my builds. Nyx first. As a reminder, duration shards are super important. The more, the better, so that you spend less time resetting the mind control ally. 343 duration on this example gets me to 205 seconds of mind control or nearly 3.5 minutes. Your aura is free. Strength does nothing on this build except the amount of % missing HP blood alter heals per second. Health conversion plus adaptation works for basic steel path for setting up more easily. It isn't really needed and you can replace these with whatever suits your playstyle better so long as you don't die. Once you got your mind control dummy, you'll be spamming 6 seconds iframes from post-cast Absorb anyways, to cover the downtime between nukes. I have token efficiency so I have just enough energy to start the setup when I load in. Range is positive for Chaos and initial absorb range. Chaos is your main way of surviving when resetting mind controlled allies as it will take longer than the 6 seconds iframes you get after absorb ends. Your fourth scales range by damage received up to max 50 meter through walls. Unfortunately, if AI is stupid or if you build your damage too high, which can bug things out, but you'll have to detonate early to reposition. Having some range allows Absorb to still knock down threats in a decent radius if you don't have the damage built up to properly kill them. Arcane Battery works for energy max scaling off armor, aka this health conversion we have equipped. But if you aren't using health conversion, just equip Prime Flow directly, or more survivability if needed. Arcane Blessing is for higher max health since I didn't want to use a slot on Vitality. Yes, this kind of Nyx works for Endurance, but of course you would have to change the build to be shield gate oriented instead. Focus School is mostly irrelevant today, but I would advise either Uneru for easy revives or my preference Matarai for faster casting speed to get the setup done quicker. I would strongly advise bringing Magus Anomaly though to make the setup easier to use, which I will explain later. For my melee Afflictions tool, I picked dual daggers because of the dual arcane proc per heavy swing. Okina Prime is my choice today, but be aware the floating daggers can proc cold, and melee Afflictions will also multiply cold procs. Maxing out cold procs freezes enemies and bricks melee Afflictions, as it cannot activate against frozen enemies. Luckily, Okina's Ghost Daggers will never target Blood Alter enemies, so this shouldn't be an issue so long as you're fast enough to cast it. Make sure you pick this status damage perk on the first tree since it does scale into Afflictions calculations. What matters for a melee Afflictions dot multiplier melee? Well, all you need is status damage and Banes to increase the damage of existing dots. Bonus damage from the melee itself is also useful, so I included Condition Overload plus crits plus Galv Reflex for initial combo since we're spamming heavies with faster wind-up speed since we multi-heavy. Though do note, most of the original damage scaling will come from your Sentinel instead. For our heat ramper, you probably want a beam weapon. Beams stack heat fastest and also have the best scaling. Fierce Incarnon is the absolute strongest choice, but I don't own it, so I used a Boar Incarnon instead, as the Incarnon Beam is pure heat with these perks for insane status stacking. Notice that Boar Incarnon does have some issues with the beam aiming, as it auto-homes on enemies that are not the Blood Altar unless you directly aim at it, so keep that in mind. Fierce Incarnon is way easier to use in this and also stack heat dots a lot faster with higher damage per stack. But the Born Karnon build looks like this. This weapon won't really get kills, so I'm skipping Galvanized mods. Merciless is just for reload speed to speed up the in-Karnon transformation. Otherwise, I built this weapon for max DPS out of the box. Crit, status damage, base damage, bane, fire rate, the whole shebang. Basically an old school hybrid build before Galvanized mods existed. You shoot this gun for heat procs into the Blood Altar as your starting damage after your Sentinel tags them, that you will then start multiplying with melee afflictions and your melee. Now, lastly is our companion, the initial applier of heat and carrier of contagious bonds so we could spread the damage into our mind-controlled dummy. I chose Helios for a very specific reason. Let's look at the build first. Now, any Sentinel can use this build, except Helios is the only one that can use Targeting Receptor. It's unranked on purpose. Why? Verglass is the only highly visible and fast heat applicator Sentinel weapon. I tried all the other alternatives and they're worse either because of consistency on proccing heat, visibility, or just bad fire rates. One problem though. Verglass damage is so high even on a priming build that they can accidentally kill enemies and trigger contagious bond spread on the wrong enemies at base deal path. This usually causes really shitty heat proc spread, making all future heat procs stacked to surrounding enemies do bad damage, or will kill all surrounding enemies early before you finish stacking your setup, making you wait for more enemies to show up. This is also the reason why you need a single target Sentinel weapon. Now, Assault Mode Unranked already has 17 meters aggro range, which is far beyond my main target and Contagious Bond spread range of 9 meters. Sentinel also ignores the Blood Altar target, which means it will start shooting at enemies further away and killing them early. Targeting Receptor is exclusive to Helios and has base 10 meter range instead, disengaging from enemies that end up 11 meters away or further if you just move back a bit. This nearly guarantees your Sentinel won't accidentally kill stuff and spread shitty heat procs while you're setting up. Yes, it says glaives, but the 10 meter aggro range works for Sentinel guns too. Use Primed Animal Instinct, you will be nuking so far out that you need that radar once you're set up. Otherwise, the build is pretty normal, just make sure you have Momentous Bond for easy companion revives if it somehow dies, as the post-absorb iframes only apply to you and not your Sentinel as well. Synth deconstruct so you can get energy back via equilibrium. Now the Verglass build looks like this. Note that this is a heat inherit primer. This means you want as much heat percent on it as possible and a proper bane. TLDR, heat inherent is that all future heat procs use the heat percent and bane percent of the original source for one of the bane double dips. Therefore, that Born Karnon I was using to shove on a ton of heat procs, yeah, it's considered as having 210% heat that my Verglass is equipped with via Hellfire, Wildfire, and Thermite rounds. Status duration makes this setup much more comfortable as all heat procs share the duration of the original source. In this case, Verglass with plus 190% status duration, or heat procs lasting 17 seconds before expiring, fully refreshable at any moment during the setup. Status duration also increases the total amount of status damage available when melee afflictions procs. Now that we have all pieces of the puzzle, how do we use this? Simple. Walk up to some enemies, your Helios will shoot one of them for heat procs. Immediately Blood Altar them. Feel free to Blood Altar other enemies around for a better healing in the meantime, since you can have up to 3 at once or cast Chaos. Now dump 50 to 100 heat procs into the Blood Altar with your beam weapon of choice, for example my Born Karnon. Next, spam roughly 8 heavy attacks on the altar with your dual daggers to bring up the exponential damage multiplier with melee afflictions. Now comes the fun bugs you need to avoid. Wait until the slash procs expire before you cast Mind Controlled on the Blood Altar. The enemy might randomly die to the slash proc despite being completely invincible. Feel free to shoot your beam at them to refresh the heat proc duration. Anyways, once you cast Mind Control on them, make sure the heat proc stays alive. Now, this is where Magus Anomaly can come in handy, because sometimes the enemies are afraid of your Mind Control dummy and will stay away. If needed, use Magus Anomaly to drag them within 9 meters of your friend so Contagious Bond can work. From here, aim at your dummy, hold Mind Control to uncast it, and cast Mind Control again as fast as you can on any nearby enemy besides the original target. The closer, the better, and preferably not a melee unit because melee AI sucks. Why closer? Further enemies have higher odds of having multiple heat chains on them, which can result in way higher heat damage that breaks the damage system. You can end up with dummies having several trillion, yes, trillion damage percent boost. Doing this often breaks your absorb and randomly deal no damage or have messed up range because the scaling range of absorb is by damage absorbed and can loop back on itself to having no range, which is why we want closer enemies to us. You might also wonder, why not recast mind control on the same enemy? Well, this is because they instantly burn out from the heat proc. If you skip the heat setup I mentioned, then, well, when you uncast mind control, you have less than 1 second until heat kicks again to recast mind control on them. By spreading the heat proc to other enemies instead, it guarantees you have a full 1 second's window to recast mind control. Why does this matter? Because mind control has a 0.7 second cast delay before it applies to the enemy and grants them iframes, which is why Matter casting speed is nice. Try using a 0.7 cast delay against heat procs with less than 1 second until it ticks again on the original enemy. Yeah, it's not fun. That's why we go the Contagious Bond route. Anyways, if you did everything right, your new mind control dummy will have a couple million to several hundred million damage percent. This is the sweet spot. Below 1 million percent, they generally do not deal enough damage per shot to let you charge your absorb and nuke rooms instantly on base steel path. When getting into billions percent, they can sometimes break the damage of your absorb to deal no damage or have no range. This is why I said you want to perform roughly 8 heavy attacks with your dual daggers melee affliction, because it has exponential scaling on damage stored. Enjoy your damage cap mind control dummy and absorb spam for the next 3 minutes plus before you have to reset it again. About 15 to 20 seconds of setup for several minutes of fun. Is it practical? You tell me. But remember, this tech we discovered has other, simpler uses that will feature in later videos. Final tip, if your dummy is in the wrong spot, going over 60 meters away from it will make it instantly teleport to you. This makes this kind of setup best for going back and forth between 2 tile sets to DPS, but it also means you can use it to rush over and one-shot dem lists, and yes, you can even use this in the new PvEVP mode, face-off, and even against the new secret steel path infested Apex tank boss in the new tile set. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I'll try my best to get you new information out as soon as possible like we're doing with the Warframe 1999 update. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds. Don't miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.